The chamber was built to inspire awe. Polished obsidian walls, curved with ancient symbols of conquest, reflected the silver-blue glow of the galaxy's core, visible beyond the transparent dome above. Dozens of alien species filled the tiers of the Imperial Conclave, each draped in their regalia, each posture laced with satisfaction. They were the rulers of 1,000 systems, the bearers of technology that had subjugated empires and rewritten histories. And they were all staring at the lone figure that had just entered. He did not bow. The humans had been late to space. Their ships were clumsy at first. Their biology seemed fragile. Their planet, too distant to matter. The Galactic Empire's scholars had studied them with idle curiosity, primitive, volatile, full of contradictions. They fought among themselves more than they advanced. Yet when contact was made, the humans didn't beg. They negotiated. And when negotiations failed, the Empire struck. Not a war. A correction. A demonstration of power. Orbit-to-surface kinetic strikes on strategic zones, power grids, military installations, communication hubs. Cities flattened with clinical efficiency. No warning, no demands. It wasn't meant to provoke. It was meant to remind. The Empire always wins. But humanity did not react like the others had. No surrender. No pleas. Their world went dark, transmissions ceased, and for weeks there was silence. Probes sent to monitor were returned as melted slag. Then, without fanfare or announcement, a diplomatic envoy requested audience. And now, he stood here, alone, unarmed, and unfazed. He wore a jet-black uniform. No insignia, no flag. His posture was upright, not aggressive, not deferential. His face was unreadable, gaze unwavering as he surveyed the amphitheater. The murmurs among the representatives were hushed but thick with disdain. The human said nothing for several moments. Then he spoke. "You attacked our home?" No flair, no accusation. Just a flat declaration, like the recitation of a fact. Yet the temperature in the room seemed to shift. The Empire's highest strategist, a serpentine being named Valkyrie, curled his six-fingered hands and leaned forward. "We acted within the bounds of Imperial regulation," he said, voice oily. "Humanity violated expansion protocols. You were warned not to militarize your orbital lanes." The human's eyes flicked to him. "We placed satellites. You launched tungsten rods at civilians." Another figure, this one covered in iridescent carapace, buzzed. "Collateral damage is regrettable but expected. You were given an example. Your species is not the first to be taught compliance." The human didn't blink. "We are the last who will need to be." A ripple of laughter spread through the chamber, but it died quickly. The human stepped forward, hands still at his sides. "You attacked our home," he repeated, "assuming that we would crumble. That a fractured planet, a fledgling species, would react like others have. You misunderstood what Earth is. You thought it was just a rock with a population." He let the silence sit. "It is more than that. It is memory. It is pain. It is fire and frost and iron. It is stories told through war and rebuilt through blood. We did not evolve under your sky. We do not answer to your treaties. Our history is not measured in cycles of obedience but in defiance." The Varnic ambassador shifted, 6 golden eyes narrowing. "Are you threatening the conclave?" "No," the human said calmly. "I am stating the finality of your mistake." The chamber stirred again, louder this time. Some were confused. Others annoyed. One or two, concerned. The human continued. "We recovered. We buried the dead. And we remembered. Every crater. Every scream. Every name burned into dust by your arrogance. And while you measured our silence as defeat, we prepared. While you debated our compliance, we built." He stepped once more toward the center, voice never raised. "We are not offering peace. We are not asking for dialogue. We came to make one thing clear, in words you cannot misinterpret." He paused only to make sure they were listening. They were. "You attacked our home. And now you have our attention. No threats. No ultimatum. Just a line that felt heavier than any declaration of war. The words carried something old, something primal. The room, once full of smug certainty, now buzzed with the faint crackle of unease. Because for the first time, they weren't sure if they were facing a species they could control, or something else entirely. They came without warning. Orbital scans were jammed seconds before impact. Defense satellites blinked out. Kinetic strikes landed in 9 global regions simultaneously: New York, Moscow, Johannesburg, Sao Paulo, Tokyo, Delhi, Berlin, Cairo, and Sydney. In under 4 minutes, 200 million people were gone. There was no declaration of war. No demand for surrender. Just calculated annihilation. The alien empire had executed what it believed to be a demonstration, enough destruction to force obedience without the need for prolonged conflict. What they hadn't anticipated was what happened next. Earth didn't break. Instead of splintering, it hardened. Governments that had spent decades in political stalemates collapsed overnight. Borders dissolved. Rivalries ended. The concept of national identity was replaced by a single directive that echoed across bunkers, shelters, and the ashes of cities: survive, adapt, retaliate. Within 72 hours, emergency coordination protocols, once theoretical, were activated. Military leaders from opposing powers shared codes. Civilian engineers began restoring power grids using salvage tech. Artificial intelligence programs initially built for economic modeling were repurposed to organize relief efforts. Every human with a skill was put to work. There were no more debates. No more bureaucracy. Earth had one priority. They mourned fast. Not coldly, never coldly, but with purpose. Funerals became vows. Survivors branded coordinates of the impacts into their skin. Children asked why, and parents gave them answers wrapped in steel: because no one will protect us except us. Within weeks, underground manufacturing centers were active. Makeshift factories hidden beneath mountain ranges and ocean floors began assembling defense platforms from spare aerospace parts and recycled orbital debris. AI systems accelerated the design of countermeasures. Civilian programmers contributed encryption protocols. Private space companies handed over their patents. No compensation requested. By the second month, Earth's remaining fleets had regrouped. Crude but armed. No attempt was made to launch a counterattack yet. Humanity knew it couldn't match the Empire's numbers or experience in space warfare. But it didn't have to. It needed time. And time they earned. The Empire, believing its point made, redirected focus elsewhere. Surveillance dropped. Patrols withdrew. Earth was labeled suppressed in their data archives. But under that false calm, humanity was building. Recruitment wasn't necessary. Every survivor volunteered. Those too old to fight trained others. Those too young to fight learned engineering, logistics, code breaking. A generation of survivors became specialists overnight. They began experimenting. Gravity manipulation, inertial dampeners, quantum tunneling, all fields where human science had only touched the surface, were now daily battlegrounds for advancement. Progress that should have taken decades happened in months. Not through brilliance alone, but through necessity. Through desperation. Through fury. Civilians retrofitted cargo vessels into attack ships. Pilots trained in VR simulators built from salvaged gaming rigs. Soldiers operated exosuits composed of old industrial exoframes patched with nanofiber composites. Weapons were tested in lunar bunkers and asteroid labs. Every new breakthrough was implemented the same day. Efficiency became religion. Yet despite it all, they remembered the loss. They didn't let it fade. They didn't bury the horror. Instead, they carried it like armor. They etched names of the fallen into the hulls of warships. Embedded sound recordings of last transmissions into AI cores. One fleet cruiser, assembled in the Mariana Trench, bore a name scraped onto it by hand: answer expected. Earth's skies remained quiet, but below that surface was the heartbeat of a species transformed. They trained without sleep. Innovated without pause. Rebuilt without rest. Not out of hope. Not for glory. But because they understood something the Empire did not, extinction wasn't the end to be feared. Submission was. When a transmission probe was captured in the Pacific Defense Zone, it was melted down within 5 minutes. No response was sent. No signal returned. Earth was no longer broadcasting. They were listening. And beneath the soil where cities once stood, under glass domes and scorched skies, something new was growing. A species no longer divided by nation or ideology. A civilization reforged by grief, precision, and will. The Empire's attack hadn't subjugated Earth. It had awakened it. And in the silence that followed, Earth sharpened its teeth. They vanished. No broadcasts, no trade signals, no detectable ship traffic. Earth, once a noisy, chaotic source of transmissions and electromagnetic clutter, went dark. To the Empire, it was further proof of collapse. Silence meant compliance. What they failed to consider was that silence could also mean preparation. The blackout was deliberate. Communications rerouted through quantum entanglement nodes, untraceable to Imperial sensors. Civilian traffic was ceased completely. Every satellite not destroyed in the attack was either disabled or repurposed. What remained in orbit became part of a planetary shield, visible only once it activated. Beneath the surface, Earth was shifting. Research zones multiplied. Arctic labs drilled into ancient ice to extract preserved extremophiles. Their genetic structures were spliced into pressure suits and bioadaptive coatings. In former deserts, solar farms once used for civilian power were turned into mobile foundries. Under the oceans, silent reactors powered experimental weapons tests. Factories now ran on geothermal heat and recycled waste. Nothing was left unused. Prototype vessels emerged in absolute secrecy. Sleek, sharp, and devoid of decorative excess, these ships were not built for intimidation. They were built for efficiency. Designed by wargamers, scientists, engineers, and survivors with no care for elegance. Only survival and victory. They had no official designation. Internally, they were referred to only by one phrase: the Silent Armada. Unlike traditional fleets, the Armada didn't rely on central command. Each unit was autonomous, equipped with adaptive AIs capable of reacting to combat variables in real time. Their hulls, composed of layered metamaterials, bent light and absorbed radiation signatures. Detection became near impossible. If they didn't want to be found, they weren't. Their FTL drives were different. They didn't mimic the Empire's corridor-based transit lanes. Human physicists had found a shortcut, an unstable, energy-demanding method of rapid phase translation. Unpredictable and risky, but ideal for an enemy expecting conventional strategy. Human ships could appear behind enemy lines with no warning, and vanish just as fast. Inside, the vessels were barebones. Every cubic meter optimized. Living quarters were compressed, oxygen recycled across algae grids, waste converted into ammunition components. The crews knew what they had signed up for. They didn't want comfort. They wanted effectiveness. Testing began in deep space. Asteroids were turned into mock enemy bases. Entire drills were run without verbal communication. Orders were delivered through encrypted thought-triggered implants, developed using a fusion of neural mapping and machine learning. The average reaction time of a silent Armada pilot was 3 times faster than any Imperial counterpart. Their weapons were unorthodox. Not just plasma and railguns, but gravitational pulse emitters, electromagnetic disruptors, nanocloud delivery pods. Human engineers embraced asymmetry. Their logic was simple: no enemy can predict what it's never seen. And then, small things started happening. An unmanned Imperial recon vessel near the Andrus Belt failed to return. Its last logs showed an empty expanse of stars. No wreckage was found. 3 days later, a listening post orbiting Aluran 9 went offline for 36 seconds. When it resumed, half its memory was corrupted, and its automated defense logs had been overwritten. It reported no hostiles. A week later, it exploded. No pattern. No declarations. Just anomalies. Commanders dismissed them. They cited system errors, freak malfunctions. Even when 5 Imperial ships disappeared along the outer colonies in less than a month, blame was assigned to pirates or equipment failure. No one suspected Earth. The humans had ensured that. Their attacks were surgical, rare, and left no trace. No radiation. No energy signature. No debris. Those who did survive, rare escapees from small skirmishes, were found in escape pods days later, mute and wide-eyed. Psychological probes showed fear, confusion, and fragments of phrases, dark shapes, no warning, couldn't track, couldn't fight. Every one of them spoke of the same impression: they hadn't been attacked. They had been studied. Meanwhile, the Empire continued underestimating. They hadn't yet seen a full armada deployment. What they encountered were scouts, data harvesters, evaluation teams measuring response times, defensive formations, weak links. Every strike served a purpose. Earth wasn't rushing. Humanity had learned patience. In the time since the bombardment, they hadn't only rebuilt, they had evolved. Technologically, strategically, psychologically. Rage hadn't clouded their judgment. It had crystallized it. Everything was focused. Everything had meaning. The Empire had taken the silence for submission. But Earth had not fallen quiet. It had gone quiet to sharpen the knife. The first official contact was a massacre. An Imperial military convoy, 7 ships escorting a diplomatic envoy, was ambushed on the fringes of Sector Darnix 14. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. The Imperial escort formation, standard and predictable, was cracked in half in under 30 seconds. The lead vessel lost propulsion, spun uncontrollably, and detonated from the inside. The rear ship imploded silently, its hull compressed by a weapon the Empire had no record of. The envoy's vessel was left drifting, systems disabled, untouched otherwise. No demands. No signals. No identification. Just silence and disappearance. Within hours, 4 more events mirrored the first. Resource depots incinerated. Weapon caches stripped. Patrols never reporting back. The pattern became clear to only the few paying attention. This was not random violence. Each strike was precise. Every loss was military, never civilian. It was surgical dismantling, done without posturing or spectacle. The Empire scrambled to adapt. They deployed counterfleets, redirected command centers, increased scout activity. But the harder they looked, the less they saw. The attackers didn't occupy territory. They didn't establish bases. They struck, extracted, and vanished. Traditional response failed. The Imperial Navy, built for overwhelming dominance, wasn't suited for guerrilla attrition. By the time their fleets arrived, targets were already gone. When traps were set, no ships came. When they stopped trying, more losses followed. Captured sensor data showed only flickers, bare traces of movement. Heatless, lightless silhouettes moving at velocities that shouldn't have been survivable. Whatever was out there didn't move like anything in known space. It didn't fight by established rules. It didn't fear retaliation. It didn't engage unless there was something to gain. And then came the message. Not a broadcast. Not a threat. A single capsule left floating near an Imperial border relay. Inside was a data core, encrypted in 3 layers. When cracked, it contained nothing but names. Over 200,000 of them. All civilians. All dead from the initial planetary strikes. There was no signature. But everyone knew who sent it. Panic began to ripple through the outer sectors. Regional governors, once loyal to Imperial order, started pulling back forces to protect local holdings. Trust in Central Command fractured. Emergency meetings were held in secrecy. The word human became synonymous not with rebellion, but with inevitability. Still, the attacks continued. No pattern. No diplomacy. In one case, a fleet station received a warning exactly 1 minute before impact. Just one phrase, auto-translated into every Imperial language: "We remember Sapporo." The Empire's greatest advantage, its psychological superiority, was eroding. Its officers, trained in suppression tactics, weren't prepared to fight ghosts. Morale collapsed as word spread of ships being found sliced open without breach alarms. Entire strike teams never returning. Surveillance feeds showing static before cutting to empty hulls. Captured survivors were always spared, but not untouched. Their suits bore a symbol burned into the metal, an Earth coordinate. A reminder. Every encounter with the silent armada ended with the same haunting outcome: no negotiations, no trophies, no displays. Just a cold efficiency paired with surgical memory. When a mining world lost contact for 3 minutes and resumed with its military core dismantled, no infrastructure harmed, the message became clear: they weren't after conquest. They weren't here to take planets. They were here to dismantle capability, piece by piece. For the first time in centuries, the Empire found itself hunted. They couldn't predict where the humans would strike. Defense protocols grew erratic. Command began censoring reports to prevent fear from spreading. Some colonies started removing Imperial flags in the hopes it would spare them. Others tried hailing human ships with peace offerings. No responses were recorded. And still, no faces were seen. No images. No live comms. Just darkness followed by loss. The humans didn't speak in battle. They didn't gloat. They didn't mock. Their silence was louder than any declaration of war. Every move they made was intentional. Every target selected with historical purpose. There was no randomness. Every blow tied back to the day the Empire had struck Earth. The message needed no repetition. The Empire had made a choice. And humanity had become the consequence. The chamber was no longer confident. Where once condescension had filled the air, now silence ruled. Word of recent events had reached even the innermost circles. Dozens of military outposts erased. Entire fleets lost without confrontation. The Empire's intelligence branch couldn't offer answers, only more questions. And now, the human stood before them again. He hadn't changed. Still wearing the same unadorned uniform, still devoid of visible emotion. But something had shifted. Not in him, he remained still, composed, but in how the conclave saw him. The weight of his presence was no longer dismissed. It was felt. One of the elder delegates rose, voice carefully measured. "We acknowledge prior excesses. Perhaps a misjudgment occurred. But continued aggression will not lead to peace." The human answered without inflection. "Peace was never offered." Another delegate snapped. "You can't possibly believe this path leads to survival. You face an empire that spans galaxies." He blinked. Slowly. "You assume we're trying to survive." A quiet murmur passed through the chamber. The human continued. "This is not resistance. It is not rebellion. It is justice, calculated and delayed, but not forgotten. You treated Earth as a test site. As if our dead were lessons we were meant to learn. We have." He reached into his coat. No one moved. From it, he produced a small device and placed it on the central projection platform. It activated automatically, keyed to the conclave's own systems. A live transmission appeared. An Imperial core system, dense with population, industry, and leadership infrastructure. Then, it began to collapse. A chain of precision detonations erupted across the orbital rings. Dockyards blinked out, starports crumbled. Not a single civilian vessel was touched. All targets were strictly military. All hits surgical. The video feed switched perspectives, jumping between orbital surveillance, internal sensors, and real-time AI diagnostics. Then the system's defense command station fractured down the center. The feed cut to black. No one spoke. The human's voice remained unchanged. "That was not a strike. It was a demonstration." A high-ranking admiral rose to his feet, scales rippling with fury. "You murder our soldiers and call it justice? You murdered civilians and called it policy. We had the right. You forfeited it the moment you struck without cause." Another delegate leaned forward, expression cautious. "Then what do you want? Terms? Territory?" Access to technology? He didn't respond immediately. Then, you will dismantle every forward base within 5 sectors of the Sol system. You will decommission the fleets stationed near border colonies. You will surrender command of orbital control networks in the Zarin corridor. And you will begin reparations equivalent to the economic losses inflicted upon Earth's surface. One of the younger officials scoffed. You think we'd agree to that? No. His eyes locked on the speaker. You'll agree after the next demonstration. You've never fought a war you couldn't dictate. Now you're learning what it means to face consequences. An ambassador tried to interject. Perhaps a mediator. He cut her off. There is no negotiation. The device pulsed once more. A second feed appeared. This time, it showed a staging area, the Empire's fallback zone in case of full-scale invasion. Every war simulation, every protocol document, named it the unbreachable redoubt. It was already burning. Transport vessels spiraled, spinning without guidance. Defense grids overloaded. Artificial gravity systems ruptured station cores from within. Automated voice recordings cried system failure in half a dozen languages. And then it too went dark. He retrieved the device and stepped back. We knew you would never stop. We knew mercy would be seen as weakness. So we decided not to speak in warnings anymore. One final sentence, delivered with clarity that left no room for misinterpretation. You attacked our home? Now you'll learn what that costs. He turned without ceremony. The doors opened before he reached them. Behind him, no one moved. No order was given. No command issued. Every delegate knew that at that moment, their empire was no longer a dominant force. It was a target. And Earth no longer stood alone. It stood above.